never imagined that walking into the boardroom of TechFlow Innovations for my first day as their new CEO would result in my cousin Marcus literally choking on his morning coffee and turning pale as a ghost. The look of absolute terror on his face when he realized that the mysterious new executive leadership everyone had been whispering about for weeks was none other than the cousin whose revolutionary app concept he had stolen 3 years ago was worth every sleepless night I had spent planning this moment. But seeing Marcus Chen fumble his presentation slides while desperately trying to explain to the board why their visionary founder suddenly couldn't remember basic details about his own company's core technology became the sweetest vindication of my grandmother's old saying, "Patience and preparation always outlast theft and arrogance." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Sarah Chen, and 3 years ago, I was a naive 26-year-old software engineer who believed that family loyalty meant everything, and that brilliant ideas would naturally find their way to success. I had just completed my master's degree in computer science from Stanford, specializing in artificial intelligence and machine learning applications for small business automation. My thesis project had been developing an AI-powered inventory management system that could predict customer demand patterns with unprecedented accuracy, automatically adjust ordering schedules, and optimize warehouse space utilization for businesses with limited resources. The concept had emerged from watching my parents struggle with their small import business in San Francisco's Richmond district. Every month, they would either overstock items that wouldn't sell or run out of popular products. Just when demand peaked, their storage space was constantly cluttered with slow-moving inventory, while fast-selling items disappeared before they could reorder. Traditional inventory management software was either too expensive for small businesses or too complex for non-tech-savvy owners to implement effectively. My solution was different. Instead of requiring extensive training or expensive hardware, my AI system could integrate with existing point-of-sale systems and learn patterns from minimal data input. It would send simple text message alerts to business owners, suggest optimal reorder quantities, and even connect them directly with suppliers for automated purchasing. The beauty was in its simplicity and affordability, designed specifically for the thousands of small businesses that were ignored by major software companies focused on enterprise clients. During my final semester, I had shared my excitement about the project with my extended family during our monthly dinner gathering at my Aunt Linda's house in Palo Alto. The Chen family had immigrated from Taiwan 2 generations ago, and these family dinners were sacred traditions, where everyone shared updates about work, school, and life challenges. It was a space where we celebrated each other's successes and offered support during difficult times. Marcus had seemed genuinely enthusiastic about my project, asking detailed questions about the technical architecture, the target market, and my plans for commercialization after graduation. As my older cousin by 5 years, Marcus had always positioned himself as a mentor figure, someone who understood the business world better than my academic focus would allow. He worked at a mid-level marketing position for a tech startup in Mountain View, and often shared stories about venture capital meetings, product launches, and the fast-paced world of Silicon Valley entrepreneurship. During that particular dinner, Marcus had been especially encouraging. "Sarah, this could really be something big," he had said, leaning forward with apparent excitement. "Small businesses are definitely an underserved market, and your AI approach sounds revolutionary. Have you thought about patent applications or investor presentations?" I had been thrilled by his interest and immediately shared my preliminary business plan, technical specifications, and market research with him. Marcus suggested we meet regularly to discuss strategy, offering to help me navigate the complex world of tech startups with his industry experience. Over the following months, we met at coffee shops throughout the Bay Area, where I would update him on my development progress while he provided feedback on business positioning and market entry strategies. Marcus seemed incredibly invested in my success, often staying late into our meetings to discuss implementation details and potential challenges. He asked probing questions about my code architecture, data processing algorithms, and user interface design. At the time, I interpreted his intense curiosity as genuine family support and valuable mentorship. He even offered to introduce me to potential investors from his professional network once I was ready to seek funding. Looking back now, I can see how systematically Marcus was gathering every detail about my innovation, while positioning himself as my trusted advisor and biggest supporter. He never directly asked for technical documentation or source code, but instead encouraged me to explain concepts thoroughly, often requesting that I sketch out system diagrams or walk through user experience flows during our discussions. Each conversation felt collaborative and supportive, with Marcus contributing genuine insights about market positioning and business development that enhanced my understanding of commercialization challenges. The first warning sign appeared 3 months after my graduation, when I was deep into developing a working prototype and preparing for my first investor pitch. Marcus had suddenly become less available for our regular meetings, citing increased responsibilities at his job and some personal projects that were demanding his attention. When we did meet, he seemed distracted and less engaged with my progress updates, often checking his phone or cutting conversations short. During our last official meeting at a Starbucks in downtown Palo Alto, Marcus had seemed unusually nervous, fidgeting with his coffee cup and avoiding direct eye contact. When I shared my excitement about finally having a functional demo ready for investor presentations, he had responded with unexpected negativity. "Sarah, I've been thinking about this market more, and I'm worried you might be moving too fast," he had said, his tone uncharacteristically cautious. The small business software space is incredibly competitive, and there are probably dozens of companies working on similar solutions. Maybe you should consider pivoting to a different application or spending more time on market research before pursuing funding. His sudden pessimism had confused me, especially since he had been so enthusiastic throughout the development process. When I asked for specific examples of competitors or market concerns, Marcus had given vague responses about industry trends and investor preferences without providing concrete evidence. The conversation had ended awkwardly, with Marcus suggesting, "We take a break from our regular meetings while I reconsidered my approach." 2 weeks later, my world collapsed in the most unexpected way. I was browsing TechCrunch during my morning coffee routine when I saw the headline that made my heart stop. TechFlow Innovations secures $2.3 million seed funding for revolutionary AI inventory management platform. The article described a startup founded by Marcus Chen, a visionary entrepreneur with deep experience in small business challenges and artificial intelligence applications. The product description was eerily familiar, describing an AI-powered inventory management system that could predict demand patterns, optimize ordering schedules, and integrate seamlessly with existing point-of-sale systems for small businesses. Every feature, every value proposition, every target market segment was identical to my thesis project and the concepts we had discussed extensively during our months of meetings. Even the marketing language seemed lifted directly from my business plan presentations. The only differences were the company name, branding colors, and Marcus's face prominently featured as the innovative founder who had identified this gap in the market. I read the article 3 times, each pass confirming that my cousin had stolen my idea completely and was now being celebrated as a brilliant entrepreneur for innovations I had spent 2 years developing. The investor quotes praised Marcus for his unique insight into small business pain points and his sophisticated technical approach to AI implementation. One venture capitalist specifically mentioned being impressed by Marcus's deep understanding of machine learning algorithms and user experience design. The betrayal felt like a physical wound, a crushing combination of shock, anger, and disbelief that someone I had trusted implicitly could deceive me so thoroughly. Marcus hadn't just stolen my idea, He had systematically gathered every detail of my work while pretending to support my success, then used his professional connections and marketing skills to secure funding for what was essentially my innovation. I immediately called my parents, who were equally shocked and outraged. My father, normally a calm and measured man, became furious when he understood the extent of Marcus's deception. My mother wanted to confront Aunt Linda immediately, but I convinced them to let me handle the situation directly with Marcus first. When I called Marcus that afternoon, he answered with a cheerfulness that seemed grotesquely inappropriate given the circumstances. "Sarah, great to hear from you. I was just thinking about you." "I saw the TechCrunch article," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. The silence that followed stretched for nearly 30 seconds before Marcus responded with a tone that attempted casualness but couldn't quite hide his nervousness. "Oh, that. Yeah, it's been an exciting few months. I've been working on this project for a while now." "Working on what project, Marcus? The AI inventory management system we discussed for months? The one that's identical to my thesis?" Another pause, then Marcus shifted to a defensive strategy that would become his standard approach throughout our subsequent interactions. "Sarah, come on. Inventory management isn't exactly a revolutionary concept. Lots of people are working on AI applications for small businesses. Just because we talked about similar ideas doesn't mean I stole anything from you." The gaslighting was immediate and comprehensive. Marcus systematically minimized the specificity of my innovation, the uniqueness of my technical approach, and the extent of our detailed discussions about implementation. He suggested that I was overreacting to coincidental similarities and that my accusations reflected poor understanding of how competitive the tech industry really was. "Besides," he continued, "I've been developing this with a full team of engineers and designers. We've created something completely different from whatever you were working on in school. The fact that some features overlap is just normal market evolution." I spent the next hour on that phone call presenting specific evidence of our conversations, referencing emails where I had shared technical specifications, and outlining the timeline that proved he had access to my complete business plan before beginning his company. Marcus responded to each point with deflection, denial, or reframing that portrayed my evidence as misunderstanding or coincidence. By the end of the conversation, I realized that Marcus had no intention of acknowledging what he had done, much less offering any form of restitution or credit. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. He had committed to his version of reality, where TechFlow Innovations was entirely his creation, and he would maintain that fiction regardless of evidence to the contrary. The aftermath of discovering Marcus's betrayal was devastating in ways I hadn't anticipated. Beyond the immediate anger and sense of injustice, I found myself questioning my judgment about people, my understanding of family loyalty, and my own capabilities as an entrepreneur. If my idea was strong enough for Marcus to steal and secure millions in funding, why hadn't I been able to achieve similar success myself? The self-doubt was compounded by practical challenges. Marcus's company had launched publicly with significant funding and media attention, making it nearly impossible for me to pursue the same market with my original concept. Even if I could prove that I had developed the idea first, competing against a well-funded startup with my cousin's face as the public representative would be an uphill battle that might not be worth the emotional and financial costs. My parents suggested legal action, and I consulted with an intellectual property attorney who reviewed my documentation of the idea's development and my communications with Marcus. While the evidence clearly showed that I had created the concept and shared it with Marcus before he founded his company, pursuing a lawsuit would be expensive, time-consuming, and uncertain in outcome. The attorney explained that ideas themselves aren't protected by intellectual property law unless they're embodied in specific copyrightable code, patentable inventions, or trademark-protected branding. Since I had shared my concepts openly with Marcus in a family context without formal confidentiality agreements, proving theft would require demonstrating that he had access to specific proprietary technical implementations rather than just general business concepts. Even more frustrating was the realization that Marcus had been smart about how he executed the theft. He had never asked for my actual source code or detailed technical documentation. Instead, he had encouraged me to explain concepts verbally and sketch out ideas during our meetings, gathering sufficient information to recreate the system without directly copying any specific protected materials. The legal complexity, combined with the emotional toll of fighting a family member publicly, led me to make what seemed like the practical decision at the time. I would let Marcus have his stolen success while I focused on developing new innovations that couldn't be taken from me. I convinced myself that this was the mature strategic approach that would ultimately lead to better outcomes than engaging in a protracted battle over past injustices. For the next 18 months, I threw myself into job applications and new project development, trying to rebuild my confidence and establish independent success. I accepted a position as a senior software engineer at a mid-sized fintech company in San Francisco, where I worked on fraud detection algorithms and payment processing systems. The work was challenging and well compensated, but it felt like a significant step backward from my entrepreneurial aspirations. During this period, I watched from a distance as TechFlow Innovations grew rapidly. Marcus appeared regularly in tech industry publications, speaking at conferences about artificial intelligence and small business innovation. He was featured on panels about entrepreneurship, gave interviews about building successful startups, and became something of a minor celebrity in the Bay Area tech scene. Each article and speaking engagement felt like another twist of the knife, especially when Marcus would share insights about AI development and market strategy that were clearly derived from our original conversations about my thesis project. He had not only stolen my idea, but was now profiting from the intellectual foundation I had provided while being celebrated as the innovative mind behind the technology. The most painful moments came during family gatherings, where Marcus would share updates about his company's growth and success. Aunt Linda beamed with pride about her son's entrepreneurial achievements, while other family members celebrated his business acumen and technical expertise. I found myself avoiding these events, unable to participate in the congratulations while knowing the truth about how his success had been achieved. My parents were supportive, but encouraged me to focus on moving forward rather than dwelling on past grievances. They worried that continued anger about Marcus's actions would prevent me from pursuing my own opportunities and achieving independent success. While I appreciated their concern for my well-being, their advice to let it go felt like another layer of injustice, as if I was being asked to accept theft as a normal cost of doing business. The turning point came during a particularly difficult family dinner 18 months after the TechFlow launch, when Marcus announced that his company had secured a major contract with a retail chain that would expand their user base by 300%. As family members congratulated him on this achievement, I realized that my strategy of quiet acceptance had been a mistake. Marcus wasn't just profiting from stolen ideas. He was building a sustainable business empire on the foundation of my innovation while I remained trapped in a conventional employment situation that didn't utilize my full potential. By choosing not to fight for recognition or restitution, I had essentially validated his theft and enabled its continuation. That evening, I made a decision that would reshape the next phase of my life. Instead of continuing to accept the injustice, passively, I would develop a long-term strategy to reclaim not just recognition for my original innovation, but control over my professional destiny. Marcus had taught me that success in the tech industry often required strategic thinking that extended beyond technical excellence to include careful positioning, relationship building, and sometimes patience in pursuing larger objectives. If he could steal my idea and build a company around it, I would develop the skills and connections necessary to eventually take control of that company myself. The plan would require years of careful preparation, but it would ultimately provide complete vindication while turning his theft into the foundation for my own entrepreneurial success. I began by conducting thorough research on TechFlow Innovations, investors, board members, market position, and growth trajectory. Using public information from funding announcements, industry reports, and Marcus's own promotional materials, I developed a comprehensive understanding of the company's strengths, weaknesses, and strategic vulnerabilities. The investor base was particularly interesting, dominated by early-stage venture capital firms that specialized in AI and small business software. Several of the key investors had backgrounds in corporate development and had been involved in multiple acquisitions of promising startups by larger technology companies. This suggested that TechFlow might eventually become an acquisition target if their growth continued or if they encountered significant operational challenges. I also studied Marcus's public presentations and interviews, noting patterns in his technical knowledge and business strategy that revealed gaps in his understanding of the underlying technology. While he could speak confidently about general AI concepts and market positioning, his explanations of specific technical implementations often lacked depth or contained subtle inaccuracies that suggested he didn't fully understand the systems his team had built based on my original concepts. This knowledge gap represented a potential vulnerability, especially if TechFlow faced complex technical challenges or needed to innovate beyond their initial product offering. Marcus's strength lay in marketing and business development, but the company's long-term success would require continued technical innovation that might exceed his capabilities. Armed with this analysis, I began developing my own expertise in areas that would be essential for eventually gaining influence over TechFlow's direction. I pursued additional certifications in business strategy and venture capital, attended industry networking events to build relationships with investors and executives, and started a side consulting practice that allowed me to work with startups, facing challenges similar to those TechFlow might encounter. The consulting work was particularly valuable, providing insights into how growing companies handle scaling challenges, investor relations, and strategic pivots. I worked with several AI startups that had secured early funding but struggled with technical implementation or market expansion. These experiences taught me about the operational complexities that Marcus would likely face as TechFlow continued growing, and they helped me develop skills in corporate strategy that complemented my technical background. Throughout this period, I maintained minimal contact with Marcus and avoided family discussions about his business success. To observers, I appeared to have moved past the initial conflict and was focused on building my own career. In reality, I was methodically preparing for a much larger confrontation that would ultimately provide complete vindication for his betrayal. The opportunity I had been preparing for emerged in the most unexpected way during the third year after TechFlow's launch. Through my consulting network, I learned that one of the company's major investors was growing concerned about operational inefficiencies and strategic direction under Marcus's leadership. The investor, Patricia Wong from Meridian Ventures, had built her reputation on identifying promising early-stage companies and then helping them scale through strategic guidance and operational improvements. Patricia's concerns about TechFlow centered on several issues that aligned perfectly with the vulnerabilities I had identified in my analysis. The company's technical development had slowed significantly after their initial product launch, suggesting difficulties in innovation beyond the original concept. Customer acquisition costs were rising while user retention rates had begun declining, indicating potential problems with product-market fit or competitive positioning. Most significantly, Patricia had noticed that Marcus seemed increasingly overwhelmed by the operational complexities of running a growing company. While his marketing and fundraising skills had been sufficient for the startup phase, scaling TechFlow required different expertise in areas like strategic planning, team management, and technical innovation, where his knowledge appeared limited. Through careful networking and professional relationship building, I arranged to meet Patricia at a venture capital conference in San Jose. Our conversation began with general discussions about AI applications and small business software, but gradually focused on the specific challenges facing companies in TechFlow's market position. When Patricia mentioned her concerns about TechFlow without naming the company directly, I was able to demonstrate deep understanding of both the technical and strategic issues she described. My insights about product development, market positioning, and operational scaling impressed her sufficiently that she suggested we continue our conversation over coffee the following week. During that coffee meeting, I carefully shared my background in AI development and my specific expertise in inventory management systems for small businesses. I mentioned having developed some of the foundational concepts in this area during my graduate research, but framed it as academic work rather than explicitly connecting it to TechFlow's origins. Patricia was intrigued by my technical depth and strategic thinking, particularly when I described potential solutions to the exact problems she was observing in her portfolio company. By the end of our conversation, she had suggested that I might be interested in consulting opportunities with companies facing similar challenges. The consulting engagement that followed was structured carefully to provide value to Patricia's portfolio companies, while positioning me as a strategic resource for complex operational challenges. Over the next 6 months, I worked with 3 different startups, helping them navigate technical scaling issues and strategic pivots with approaches that consistently exceeded expectations. Each successful engagement enhanced my reputation within Patricia's network and demonstrated my capability to provide transformative guidance to growing technology companies. More importantly, it established a relationship of trust and professional respect that would be essential for the final phase of my plan. The culmination of my preparation came when Patricia approached me directly about a specific opportunity that she described as particularly challenging and potentially very rewarding. A portfolio company was facing significant operational difficulties and needed experienced leadership to implement a strategic turnaround. The role would require someone with both technical expertise and business strategy capabilities, along with the confidence to make difficult decisions in a complex situation. When Patricia revealed that the company was TechFlow Innovations and that they were seeking a new CEO to replace the current leadership, I experienced a moment of perfect clarity about how all my planning and preparation had led to this exact opportunity. Marcus's theft of my idea had indeed been the foundation for his company's success, but it would also become the mechanism for my ultimate vindication. I accepted Patricia's invitation to interview for the CEO position with careful enthusiasm, positioning myself as someone excited by the challenge of scaling an AI company with significant market potential but substantial operational complexities. Throughout the interview process, I demonstrated deep understanding of the technical and strategic issues facing TechFlow, while maintaining the fiction that my knowledge came from general industry expertise rather than specific familiarity with the company's origins. The board's decision to offer me the CEO position represented complete validation of my strategic patience and careful preparation. Marcus's theft of my innovation had ultimately created the vehicle for my own rise to leadership in the tech industry, with the added satisfaction of taking control of the very company he had built on stolen concepts. As I prepared for my first day as CEO of TechFlow Innovations, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment. The naive 26-year-old who had trusted her cousin's apparent mentorship had been replaced by a strategic leader, capable of long-term planning and complex relationship building. The betrayal that had initially seemed like a career-ending disaster had instead become the catalyst for developing skills and connections that made me far more formidable than I would have been if Marcus had never stolen my idea. Standing outside the TechFlow offices on that Monday morning, wearing my most professional outfit and carrying a briefcase full of strategic plans for the company's future, I felt a deep sense of anticipation about the confrontation that awaited. Marcus had no idea that his new CEO was the cousin whose innovation had made his initial success possible, and I looked forward to the moment when that realization would transform his stolen triumph into the foundation for my authentic leadership. The emerald bracelet my grandmother had given me for graduation caught the morning light as I reached for the door handle, reminding me of her old saying about patience and preparation outlasting theft and arrogance. Today would prove whether 3 years of careful planning could indeed transform betrayal into justice and stolen ideas into reclaimed power. The TechFlow Innovations headquarters occupied 3 floors of a gleaming glass tower in downtown San Francisco, its modern interior designed to project innovation and success. As I stepped through the main entrance at precisely 8:30 that Monday morning, I noted the polished concrete floors, exposed brick walls, and carefully curated artwork that screamed expensive startup aesthetic. The reception area buzzed, with the controlled energy of a growing company, employees hurrying past with coffee cups and laptops while maintaining the casual professionalism that defined Silicon Valley culture. Marcus had clearly invested heavily in creating an impressive, physical presence for his stolen empire. The company logo, a stylized geometric pattern in blue and silver, dominated the wall behind the reception desk alongside quotes about innovation and disruption that probably came from a generic startup inspiration handbook. Everything about the space was designed to convey credibility and forward-thinking vision to investors, clients, and potential employees who might not look too closely at the actual substance behind the polished presentation. Rebecca Martinez, the executive assistant Patricia Wong had arranged to facilitate my transition, met me at the elevator with a warm smile and a detailed orientation packet. She appeared to be in her early 30s, impeccably dressed in a way that suggested both competence and diplomatic skills essential for managing executive schedules and sensitive communications. "Ms. Chen, welcome to TechFlow," she said, extending her hand with genuine enthusiasm. "The entire team is excited about your leadership. We've prepared a comprehensive briefing package covering all major operational areas, and I've scheduled individual meetings with department heads throughout your first week." As we rode the elevator to the executive floor, Rebecca provided a tactful overview of the company's current situation that confirmed many of the concerns Patricia had shared. During our confidential discussions, revenue growth had stagnated over the past quarter despite increased marketing spending. Several key clients had expressed dissatisfaction with product limitations that the development team seemed unable to address effectively. Most significantly, employee morale had declined as Marcus became increasingly defensive about strategic criticism and resistant to operational changes that might threaten his position as the visionary founder. The executive suite occupied a corner of the building's top floor, offering panoramic views of San Francisco Bay and the surrounding hills. Marcus's office, soon to be my office, was larger than necessary and decorated with startup memorabilia. That included framed magazine covers featuring his face, awards from various tech industry organizations, and photographs from conference speaking engagements where he pontificated about artificial intelligence and entrepreneurship. What struck me most powerfully about the space was how thoroughly it represented Marcus's transformation from the insecure marketing employee I had known 3 years ago into someone who had convinced himself that he truly was the innovative genius the media had portrayed him as. The office wasn't just decorated for external impression. It was designed to reinforce his own revised personal narrative, where stealing my idea had become genuine inspiration, and borrowed concepts had transformed into original innovation. Rebecca walked me through the executive calendar for the week, highlighting the board meeting scheduled for 10 o'clock, where I would be formally introduced to the full leadership team and key department heads. Marcus would be present for the transition announcement, though Patricia had arranged for him to be informed only that morning about the new leadership structure to minimize potential resistance or sabotage attempts. Mr. Chen seemed surprised when I mentioned the board meeting this morning, Rebecca noted diplomatically. I believe he was under the impression that the board was still evaluating potential candidates rather than making a final decision. The understatement was probably significant. Marcus likely assumed that his founder status and public profile made him irreplaceable, despite growing investor concerns about operational performance. Learning that not only was he being replaced, but that the replacement had already been selected and was beginning immediately, would come as a considerable shock to someone accustomed to controlling every aspect of his company's direction. I spent the next hour reviewing detailed reports about TechFlow's current operational status, while Rebecca arranged for my security access, employee handbook, and various administrative necessities. The financial documents revealed concerning patterns that went beyond the general challenges Patricia had described. Customer acquisition costs had indeed risen substantially, but more troubling was evidence that existing clients were reducing their usage rather than expanding their engagement with the platform. The technical reports painted an even more disturbing picture. Product development had essentially stalled after the initial launch version, with most subsequent updates consisting of minor interface modifications rather than substantial functionality improvements. Customer support tickets increasingly focused on feature requests and performance issues that suggested the underlying technology was reaching the limits of its capability to scale effectively. Most revealing were the internal communications logs between Marcus and his development team. The exchanges showed a clear pattern where Marcus would propose ambitious new features or strategic pivots without understanding their technical complexity or resource requirements. When engineers attempted to explain implementation challenges or suggest alternative approaches, Marcus would respond with frustration and accusations that they lacked sufficient ambition or technical creativity. The dynamic was particularly problematic because Marcus's public reputation depended on being perceived as a technical visionary who understood both the business and engineering aspects of artificial intelligence development. Any admission that he needed guidance or education about the technology would undermine the personal brand he had built around being the innovative mind behind TechFlow's success. This created a destructive cycle where Marcus felt compelled to make increasingly grandiose technical promises to maintain his image, while his team struggled to implement concepts that often weren't technically feasible or strategically coherent. The result was declining morale among engineers, frustrated clients who had been promised capabilities that never materialized, and a growing disconnect between TechFlow's public positioning and its actual technological capabilities. As I absorbed these details, I realized that Marcus's theft of my original concept had been both more and less successful than I had initially understood. He had indeed secured significant funding and media attention by presenting my ideas as his own innovation. However, his lack of deep technical understanding meant that he couldn't effectively guide the company beyond the initial implementation of concepts I had already developed. TechFlow had essentially been coasting on the strength of my original thesis work without the foundation of genuine technical expertise necessary for continued innovation and growth. Marcus had stolen my idea successfully, but he hadn't stolen my capability to generate new ideas or my understanding of how to implement complex AI systems effectively. The realization was both satisfying and strategically valuable. Not only did Marcus's technological limitations provide clear justification for new leadership, but they also meant that I could dramatically improve TechFlow's performance by applying the same innovative thinking that had created the original concept he had appropriated. Rebecca knocked softly on the office door to announce that department heads were assembling in the main conference room for the transition meeting. As we walked through the open office space toward the boardroom, I observed TechFlow's employees with new appreciation for the dynamics I would be inheriting along with the CEO position. The engineering team occupied a section of the floor filled with multiple monitors, whiteboards covered in technical diagrams, and the organized chaos typical of software development environments. Several programmers looked up as we passed, their expressions reflecting curiosity about the new leadership, rather than the resignation or anxiety that might indicate serious morale problems. The sales and customer support areas showed different energy patterns, with representatives engaged in phone conversations that seemed more focused on damage control than growth opportunities. I caught fragments of discussions about feature limitations, implementation delays, and pricing concerns that suggested TechFlow's market position was more precarious than external reporting had indicated. The marketing department appeared busy, but somewhat disconnected from the operational reality I was observing elsewhere in the office. Their walls were covered with campaign materials emphasizing TechFlow's innovative technology and industry leadership, messaging that seemed increasingly divorced from the company's actual capabilities and performance metrics. The main conference room continued the expensive startup aesthetic with a massive wooden table, high-end video conferencing equipment, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Bay Area. Board members and department heads were already seated. When Rebecca escorted me inside, their expressions ranging from curious anticipation to barely concealed anxiety about the leadership transition. Patricia Wong sat at the head of the table in her capacity as lead investor and board chair, her presence immediately commanding attention and respect. The other board members included 2 additional venture capital partners, the chief technology officer who had been with TechFlow since its early days, and the head of sales who had joined during the company's rapid growth phase. Marcus occupied a seat toward the middle of the table, his body language revealing tension despite his attempt to project confidence and control. He wore an expensive suit that probably cost more than most employees' monthly salaries, and his expression suggested someone trying to maintain authority in a situation where his actual power was rapidly diminishing. When Patricia began the meeting by introducing me as TechFlow's new chief executive officer, the reaction around the table was immediate and revealing. Several department heads exchanged glances that suggested relief rather than surprise, indicating that Marcus's leadership problems had been apparent to operational staff, even if they hadn't been openly discussed. Marcus himself went through a fascinating sequence of expressions, beginning with confusion, progressing through disbelief, and finally settling on a forced smile that couldn't quite hide his underlying panic. He clearly hadn't anticipated that the board's concerns about his performance would result in such immediate and decisive action. "I'm sure everyone joins me in welcoming Sarah to the TechFlow family," Patricia continued smoothly. Her background in artificial intelligence development and strategic business planning makes her ideally suited to guide our next phase of growth and innovation. The polite applause that followed felt genuine from most participants, though Marcus's contribution was notably mechanical. As Patricia outlined the transition timeline and my immediate priorities, I watched Marcus carefully, noting how his confident public persona was gradually cracking under the stress of losing control over the company he had built on stolen concepts. When Patricia invited me to address the team, I stood with the calm confidence that came from 3 years of careful preparation for exactly this moment. Looking around the table, I made eye contact with each person before beginning to speak, establishing the kind of direct connection that Marcus had always avoided in favor of performative presentations. "Thank you all for your warm welcome," I began. "I'm excited about the opportunity to work with such a talented team during what I believe will be a transformative period for TechFlow." I paused deliberately, allowing my gaze to rest briefly on Marcus before continuing. "My background in AI development and small business software has given me deep appreciation for both the technical challenges and market opportunities that define our industry. I look forward to learning from each of you about TechFlow's current strengths and working together to address areas where we can improve our performance." The statement was carefully constructed to communicate competence and collaborative leadership, while subtly highlighting my technical expertise in exactly the areas where Marcus had been struggling. Several department heads nodded with apparent enthusiasm, particularly the engineering managers who seemed relieved by the prospect of working with someone who understood their technical challenges. Marcus's expression during my introduction was particularly fascinating to observe. As I spoke about my background in AI development and small business applications, I could see recognition beginning to dawn in his eyes. The specific combination of expertise areas delivered by someone with the same last name was probably triggering memories of our conversations 3 years ago. However, he couldn't immediately place me in the context of our family relationship because the confident executive addressing the board bore little resemblance to the naive graduate student he had manipulated and betrayed. The transformation in my appearance, demeanor, and professional presence made it difficult for him to reconcile his memories with the reality of who was standing before him. When Patricia opened the floor for questions and introductions from department heads, I listened carefully to each person's overview of their responsibilities and current challenges. The pattern that emerged confirmed my analysis of TechFlow's fundamental problems while providing specific insights about how to address them effectively. The engineering team was frustrated by Marcus's tendency to commit to unrealistic technical deliverables without consulting them about feasibility or resource requirements. The sales team struggled to explain product limitations to clients who had been promised capabilities that didn't exist. The customer support staff spent increasing amounts of time managing complaints about performance issues and missing features rather than helping clients maximize their success with existing functionality. Most revealing was the subtle way each department head described their relationship with Marcus, using diplomatic language that conveyed respect for his position while carefully avoiding any endorsement of his actual leadership capabilities. They had clearly been hoping for exactly the kind of change that my appointment represented. As the meeting progressed, I responded to questions and concerns with specific, actionable insights that demonstrated both technical depth and strategic thinking. When the engineering manager described challenges with scaling the AI algorithms for larger client databases, I was able to suggest several optimization approaches that could improve performance without requiring complete system redesigns. When the sales director mentioned difficulty explaining product limitations to potential clients, I outlined a positioning strategy that would emphasize TechFlow's current strengths while creating realistic expectations about future development timelines. The approach would allow the sales team to be more honest about capabilities while building trust through reliable delivery rather than overpromising and underperforming. Each response clearly impressed the team members while simultaneously highlighting the contrast between my substantive expertise and Marcus's tendency toward vague enthusiasm without practical solutions. By the end of the meeting, the department heads were displaying the kind of engaged energy that indicated genuine optimism about working under new leadership. Marcus remained largely silent throughout these exchanges, occasionally nodding or making brief comments that suggested agreement, while revealing his inability to contribute meaningfully to technical discussions. His discomfort was becoming increasingly obvious as he realized that his replacement possessed exactly the expertise he had been lacking. As the formal meeting concluded and team members began filing out to return to their responsibilities, Marcus lingered in the conference room with an expression that suggested he was finally beginning to recognize who I actually was. The combination of my specific technical knowledge, my focus on AI applications for small businesses, and the growing certainty about my identity was creating a perfect storm of realization. Patricia excused herself to handle other business, leaving Marcus and me alone in the conference room for our first direct conversation since he had stolen my innovation 3 years ago. The silence stretched for nearly a minute as he struggled to process the implications of what was happening. "Sarah?" he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sarah Chen? My cousin Sarah?" I smiled with the calm satisfaction that came from years of patient planning finally reaching their intended conclusion. "Hello, Marcus. It's been a while since our coffee meetings where you were so interested in my thesis project." The blood drained from his face as the full scope of his situation became clear. Not only had he been replaced as CEO of the company he had built on stolen concepts, but his replacement was the very person whose innovation had made his initial success possible. The symmetry was so perfect that it almost seemed fictional, except that it was the inevitable result of strategic thinking and careful preparation. "I don't understand," he stammered. "How are you here? Why are you here? This doesn't make sense." "It makes perfect sense," I replied calmly. "You stole my idea and built a company around it. Unfortunately, you didn't steal my ability to continue innovating or my capacity to develop the business skills necessary to eventually take control of what you created using my work." Marcus's composure was completely shattered now, his confident founder persona replaced by the insecure family member who had always felt threatened by others' success. "You can't prove that I stole anything. We discussed similar concepts, but TechFlow is completely my creation. The denial was predictable but pathetic given our current circumstances. Marcus, I don't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. I'm now the CEO of your company, which gives me access to all your technical documentation, business plans, and operational records. More importantly, I have the expertise to take TechFlow far beyond anything you were capable of achieving with my stolen concepts. I stood and moved toward the door, then paused to deliver the final insight that would define our new relationship. You know what the most satisfying part of this situation is? You're going to watch me transform your stolen success into something genuinely innovative and valuable. Every improvement I make, every new client we acquire, every piece of recognition TechFlow receives will remind you that you were never actually capable of building what you claim to have created. As I left Marcus sitting alone in the conference room, probably contemplating the complete reversal of his professional fortunes, I felt a deep sense of vindication that went far beyond personal satisfaction. Justice had been served through patience, preparation, and strategic thinking, rather than legal battles or family confrontations that might have provided less satisfying outcomes. The afternoon was spent in individual meetings with each department head, diving deeper into operational challenges and beginning to develop specific improvement strategies. The conversations confirmed that TechFlow's problems were entirely solvable with proper technical leadership and strategic direction. The engineering team was particularly eager to discuss the optimization approaches I had suggested during the morning meeting. When I outlined specific algorithmic improvements that could enhance performance while reducing computational costs, their enthusiasm was immediate and genuine. For the first time in months, they felt like they were working with leadership that understood their challenges and could provide meaningful guidance. The sales team meeting revealed even more encouraging possibilities. When I explained how we could reposition TechFlow's current capabilities more accurately while developing a realistic roadmap for enhanced functionality, the sales director immediately began identifying clients who had been frustrated by overpromising, but would be excited by honest assessment and reliable delivery. Most importantly, the customer support analysis showed that many client complaints resulted from confusion about how to effectively utilize existing features rather than fundamental technological limitations. A combination of improved user interface, design, and enhanced customer education could dramatically improve client satisfaction without requiring major development resources. By the end of my first day, I had developed a comprehensive 90-day improvement plan that would address TechFlow's most pressing challenges while laying the foundation for sustainable growth and innovation. The plan leveraged my deep understanding of the underlying technology, my strategic business skills, and my ability to inspire teams through authentic expertise rather than performative enthusiasm. Marcus had indeed stolen my original idea and built initial success around it. However, his theft had ultimately created the vehicle for my own rise to leadership in the tech industry, with the added satisfaction of taking control of the very company he had founded on concepts he had never truly understood. As I prepared to leave the TechFlow offices that evening, I reflected on how completely the power dynamic had shifted since our last conversation 3 years ago. Marcus's betrayal had forced me to develop capabilities and connections that made me far more formidable than I would have been if he had never stolen my innovation. Standing in what was now my office, looking out at the San Francisco skyline where Marcus's stolen empire was about to become the foundation for my authentic leadership, I felt grateful for the hard lessons that had transformed naive trust into strategic wisdom. Tomorrow would begin the process of showing him exactly what genuine innovation looked like when it wasn't constrained by the limitations of theft and deception. The transformation of TechFlow Innovations over the following 6 months exceeded even my most optimistic projections. What Marcus had built through theft and marketing savvy, I rebuilt through genuine technical innovation and strategic leadership that finally unlocked the true potential of the concepts he had appropriated years earlier. The first major breakthrough came during my 3rd week as CEO, when I identified fundamental inefficiencies in the core AI algorithms that had been limiting system performance and scalability. The original code architecture, hastily assembled by Marcus's development team based on incomplete understanding of my thesis concepts, contained several critical bottlenecks that prevented the software from handling larger client databases effectively. Working directly with the engineering team, I redesigned the machine learning pipeline to optimize both speed and accuracy while reducing computational requirements by nearly 40%. The improvements weren't just technical modifications. They represented a complete evolution of the original concept into something far more sophisticated and powerful than what I had initially developed during graduate school. The engineering staff responded to this hands-on technical leadership with enthusiasm that bordered on relief. For months, they had struggled to implement Marcus's ambitious but technically incoherent demands, knowing that his public promises exceeded their ability to deliver with the existing system architecture. Having a CEO who not only understood the technology, but could actively contribute to its improvement, created an entirely different working dynamic. Jennifer Walsh, the lead software architect who had been with TechFlow since its early days, summed up the transformation during one of our weekly technical review meetings. "Sarah, for the first time since I joined this company, I feel like we're actually building something innovative, rather than just maintaining someone else's vision that we never fully understood." The comment was particularly meaningful because Jennifer had been present during the original development of TechFlow's initial product, working directly with specifications that Marcus had provided based on my stolen concepts. She had always sensed that something was missing from the technical foundation, gaps in understanding that made it difficult to extend or improve the core functionality effectively. With my direct involvement, those gaps disappeared. Each enhancement, built logically on previous improvements, creating a coherent development trajectory that enabled rapid innovation without compromising system stability. The engineering team began proposing their own optimizations and feature additions, confident that their work would integrate seamlessly with a technical architecture they finally understood completely. The operational improvements had immediate impact on client satisfaction and business performance. Customer support tickets dropped by 60% as system reliability improved and user interfaces became more intuitive. Existing clients began expanding their usage rather than reducing their engagement, generating additional revenue without requiring expensive new customer acquisition efforts. More significantly, the enhanced capabilities enabled TechFlow to pursue market opportunities that had been impossible under Marcus's limited technical leadership. We developed specialized modules for restaurant chains, retail stores, and professional service businesses, each customized to address specific inventory challenges while maintaining the core AI-driven optimization approach. The restaurant industry application became particularly successful, incorporating real-time sales data with weather patterns, local events, and seasonal trends to predict demand for perishable ingredients with remarkable accuracy. Restaurant owners could reduce food waste by 20 to 30% while ensuring they never ran out of popular menu items during peak periods. The retail application integrated with point-of-sale systems and supplier databases to automate reordering processes while optimizing storage space utilization and minimizing overstock situations. Small retail businesses reported inventory cost reductions of 15 to 25%, along with improved customer satisfaction from better product availability. Each successful implementation reinforced TechFlow's reputation as a genuinely innovative company rather than just another AI startup with ambitious marketing claims. Industry analysts began recognizing us as technical leaders rather than simply well-funded competitors, a distinction that translated into increased investor interest and partnership opportunities. Marcus's response to these developments was fascinating to observe from my position as the architect of his professional destruction. During his first month as a displaced founder, he had attempted to maintain influence through informal conversations with employees and suggestions about strategic direction that revealed his continued belief that he understood the business better than anyone else. However, as the technical improvements became undeniable and client satisfaction scores reached record levels, Marcus's credibility within the company evaporated completely. Employees who had previously respected his founder status began avoiding interactions with him, recognizing that his presence had become an awkward reminder of previous limitations rather than ongoing value. The board of directors formalized this reality during our quarterly review meeting when Patricia Wong announced that Marcus's remaining equity stake would be subject to performance-based vesting that effectively eliminated his influence over company decisions. The message was clear. TechFlow's success under new leadership had made his continued involvement unnecessary and potentially counterproductive. Marcus's public image suffered even more dramatically as industry observers began recognizing the dramatic improvements in TechFlow's technical capabilities and market performance. Articles that had previously praised his visionary leadership were replaced by analyses questioning how such fundamental enhancements could emerge so quickly under different management. The most devastating blow to his reputation came from an investigative piece published by TechCrunch, the same publication that had originally celebrated his entrepreneurial success 3 years earlier. The article, titled "When Founders Become Obstacles, the TechFlow Transformation," detailed how operational improvements under new leadership suggested that previous limitations had resulted from inadequate technical expertise rather than market or technological constraints. While the article didn't explicitly accuse Marcus of fraud or theft, its implications were unmistakable to anyone familiar with startup dynamics and technical development patterns. The speed and scope of improvements under my leadership could only be explained by dramatically superior understanding of the underlying technology and market applications. Marcus attempted to respond to this negative coverage through social media posts and industry forum comments that emphasized his role in TechFlow's initial success and questioned whether recent improvements represented sustainable progress or temporary optimizations that would prove unsustainable. His desperation was evident in the increasingly defensive tone of these communications. The final humiliation came during the annual Silicon Valley AI conference, where I had been invited to deliver a keynote presentation about innovative approaches to small business automation. The invitation itself represented recognition of TechFlow's high emergence as a technical leader, rather than just another well-funded startup. My presentation focused on the algorithmic optimizations and user experience innovations that had transformed TechFlow's capabilities over the previous 6 months. Without mentioning Marcus directly, I described the challenges of inheriting technical architecture with fundamental limitations and the systematic approach required to rebuild core functionality while maintaining operational continuity. The audience response was overwhelmingly positive, with multiple venture capital firms and potential partners approaching me afterward to discuss collaboration opportunities. The contrast with Marcus's previous conference appearances, which had focused on general entrepreneurship themes rather than technical substance, was stark and widely noticed by industry observers. Marcus was present in the audience during my presentation, having apparently attended the conference in an attempt to maintain his professional network and industry visibility. Watching him during my technical demonstrations was perhaps the most satisfying moment of my entire vindication strategy. His expression throughout the presentation revealed the complete comprehension of how thoroughly his stolen success had been transformed into genuine innovation that exceeded anything he could have achieved with my original concepts. Every technical detail I explained, every optimization I described, every capability demonstration reinforced his understanding that he had never truly possessed the expertise necessary to build what TechFlow had become. During the question and answer session following my presentation, an audience member asked about the rapid pace of innovation at TechFlow and whether such improvements suggested that previous technical approaches had been fundamentally flawed. My response was carefully measured but devastating in its implications. Innovation in artificial intelligence requires deep understanding of both theoretical foundations and practical implementation challenges, I replied. When technical leadership possesses that understanding, rapid improvement becomes possible because each enhancement builds logically on previous work, rather than attempting to patch inadequate foundational architecture. The answer provided no direct criticism of Marcus while making it clear that TechFlow's previous limitations had resulted from inadequate technical leadership rather than inherent market or technological constraints. The implication was unmistakable to anyone familiar with the company's history and recent transformation. After the presentation, Marcus approached me in the conference lobby with an expression that combined humiliation with desperate anger. Our conversation was brief, but revealed the complete collapse of his professional confidence and personal justification for the theft that had initiated this entire sequence of events. "You've destroyed everything I built," he said, his voice barely controlled. 3 years of work, completely undermined by someone who couldn't even get investors interested in her original idea. The accusation was particularly ironic, given that his entire company had been built on concepts I had developed, and that my inability to attract investors had resulted from his theft removing my opportunity to pursue funding independently. His continued refusal to acknowledge the fundamental dishonesty of his actions demonstrated the psychological defense mechanisms that had allowed him to rationalize theft as legitimate entrepreneurship. "Marcus, I didn't destroy anything you built," I replied calmly. "I improved what you stole." The difference between theft and innovation is that innovation can be extended and enhanced, while theft reaches its limits when the original creator is no longer available to provide guidance. The conversation ended when Marcus walked away, without response, apparently recognizing that further discussion would only reinforce his complete defeat and professional humiliation. Our family relationship, already damaged beyond repair by his betrayal, was now formally concluded along with any pretense that his success had been legitimately achieved. 6 months later, TechFlow Innovations completed a successful Series B funding round that valued the company at 10 times its worth during Marcus's leadership. The investment was led by Sequoia Capital, one of Silicon Valley's most prestigious venture capital firms, based on our demonstrated technical capabilities and rapidly expanding market presence. The funding announcement included my appointment as both CEO and Chief Technology Officer, formally recognizing my dual expertise in business strategy and technical innovation. The press release specifically highlighted TechFlow's revolutionary approach to AI-driven business optimization and my background in foundational research that defined the industry's current capabilities. Marcus's name appeared nowhere in the funding announcement or subsequent media coverage, despite his continued minority ownership stake in the company. He had been completely erased from TechFlow's public narrative, replaced by accurate representation of the technical expertise and innovative thinking that had always been the true foundation of the company's potential. The personal satisfaction of this vindication was enhanced by its broader implications for my career and professional reputation. The success of TechFlow under my leadership had established me as a recognized expert in AI applications for small business automation, opening opportunities for speaking engagements, advisory positions, and potential future ventures that far exceeded anything I could have achieved with my original thesis project. Marcus's theft, intended to deprive me of credit and opportunity for my innovation, had ultimately created the circumstances that enabled me to demonstrate capabilities far beyond what I had possessed as a naive graduate student. His betrayal had forced me to develop strategic thinking, business expertise, and professional networks that made me far more formidable than I would have been if he had never stolen my idea. The final chapter of our story was written during TechFlow's 3rd anniversary celebration, held at the same upscale hotel where Marcus had originally announced his Series A funding 3 years earlier. The event celebrated our emergence as one of Silicon Valley's most successful AI companies, with client testimonials, technical demonstrations, and recognition from industry leaders who praised our innovative approach and rapid growth. I delivered the keynote address wearing the same emerald bracelet my grandmother had given me for graduation, now complemented by a matching necklace that represented my own achievements rather than inherited legacy. The jewelry caught the ballroom lights as I spoke about perseverance, authentic innovation, and the importance of building success on genuine expertise rather than borrowed concepts. Marcus was not invited to the anniversary celebration, though. Several family members attended to show their support for my success. Aunt Linda, his mother, approached me after the presentation with a mixture of pride and embarrassment that reflected her understanding of what had really transpired between her son and me. "Sarah, I want you to know that I'm incredibly proud of what you've accomplished," she said quietly. "I also want you to know that I understand there were complications between you and Marcus that I wish had been handled differently." Her diplomatic acknowledgement of the situation was as close to an apology as I would receive from Marcus's side of the family, and I appreciated her recognition that my success had been achieved despite rather than because of her son's actions. The conversation provided closure for the family relationships that had been damaged by Marcus's betrayal and my subsequent vindication. As the celebration concluded and guests began departing, I stood on the hotel's terrace overlooking Silicon Valley, reflecting on the journey that had brought me from naive graduate student to successful CEO through the unexpected catalyst of family betrayal and theft. The lights of the tech companies below represented an ecosystem where innovation and deception often competed for recognition and rewards. My experience had taught me that while theft might provide temporary advantage, sustainable success required genuine expertise, authentic leadership, and the ability to continuously innovate beyond borrowed concepts. Marcus had stolen my idea and achieved initial recognition, but his lack of true understanding had ultimately limited his ability to build lasting value. The emerald jewelry caught the evening light as I prepared to leave, reminding me of my grandmother's wisdom about patience and preparation, outlasting deception and arrogance. Her words had proven prophetic in ways she could never have anticipated, guiding me through a complex journey of betrayal, strategic planning, and ultimate vindication that had transformed personal injustice into professional triumph. TechFlow Innovations would continue growing under my leadership, developing new applications for AI-driven business optimization that extended far beyond the original concepts Marcus had stolen. Each innovation would serve as evidence that authentic expertise creates value that theft cannot replicate, and that genuine leadership builds foundations that borrowed authority cannot maintain. The story of my cousin's betrayal and my strategic response had become a case study in Silicon Valley circles about the difference between temporary success, built on deception, and sustainable achievement founded on genuine capability. Marcus had learned too late that stealing ideas without understanding their foundations creates vulnerabilities that patient and prepared competitors can eventually exploit. Standing on that terrace, I realized that Marcus had inadvertently provided me with the greatest gift possible, the motivation and opportunity to discover capabilities I might never have developed if he had remained trustworthy. His theft had forced me to become stronger, smarter, and more strategic than I would have been if he had never betrayed my trust. The transformation was complete. The naive graduate student who had trusted her cousin's apparent mentorship had become a strategic leader capable of turning betrayal into triumph and stolen concepts into genuine innovation that exceeded anything the original thief could have achieved. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.